Why are we moving out of a house we do like so you can keep a job you don't like?
I don't know.
I win.
Some 80s sitcoms are timeless classics. Others are like a party guest who just won't leave. You'll be shocked to learn how a show about four older women became a pop culture giant, only to fizzle out in a spin-off that almost no one remembers. The reason why is heartbreaking. 1. Who's the Boss?
I only have a shower. And sometimes I love to take bubble baths.
Really?
Yeah.
You in a bubble bath? Oh, I always pictured you in the shower.
The premise of Who's the Boss? It was a classic 80s role reversal. Tony Micheli, a tough but kind Italian-American former baseball player from Brooklyn, takes a job as a live-in housekeeper for a high-powered, divorced advertising executive named Angela Bauer in Connecticut. Tony brought his daughter, Samantha, and Angela had her son, Jonathan. The show was built on the culture clash between Tony's working-class background and Angela's upscale world. But the real engine of the show was the chemistry between Tony and Angela. From the very first episode, the question was, will they or won't they get together? For the first few seasons, this romantic tension was charming and fun. It created great comedic moments and some genuinely sweet scenes. But the show ran for 8 seasons, and for most of that time, they kept teasing the audience. They would almost get together, then something would pull them apart. They would date other people, get jealous, and then go back to just being friends. After a while, it stopped being charming and started being incredibly frustrating. Fans were screaming at their TVs, "Just get together already!" By the time they finally did become a couple in the final season, the magic was gone. It felt like it was too little, too late. The show had stretched its central premise so thin that the payoff just wasn't satisfying. It taught Hollywood a valuable lesson: don't make your audience wait forever. If you think dragging out a romance is bad, wait until you see a show that destroyed its core premise with a wedding. 2. Kate and Allie.
Do you want to get married again?
Someday.
Wasn't a question, it was a proposal.
Kate and Allie was a really fresh and smart sitcom for its time. It premiered in 1984 and centered on 2 childhood friends, Kate McCardle and Allie Lowell. Both are divorced, and they decide to move into a Greenwich Village apartment together to save money and help raise their children. Kate was a bold, modern working woman, while Allie was a more traditional, stay-at-home mom. Their different personalities created a wonderful dynamic. The show was about their friendship, their adventures in dating after divorce, and the challenges of creating a new kind of family. It was celebrated for being a show about women supporting women. The show was a hit for 5 seasons, staying true to its core idea. But then, in the 6th and final season, the creators made a decision that completely undermined the show's foundation. Allie, the more traditional one, meets a sportscaster named Bob and gets married to him. He moves into the apartment, and the show's title was even changed in the credits to Kate and Allie and Bob. The entire point of the show, 2 single women making it on their own, was gone. It suddenly became a show about a married couple with Kate as a third wheel in her own home. The chemistry was off, the stories weren't as compelling, and the show lost the very thing that made it special. It was canceled halfway through that season, a sad end for a show that forgot what its fans loved about it. Losing your premise is bad, but what about a show that lost its sharpest voice due to some major backstage drama? 3. Designing Women.
That's really... And you probably didn't know, Marjorie, that Suzanne was not just any Miss Georgia. She was the Miss Georgia.
For years, Designing Women was one of the smartest and funniest shows on television. Premiering in 1986, it followed 4 women running an interior design firm in Atlanta, Georgia. The show was famous for its whip-smart dialogue and its powerful speeches, usually delivered by the fiery Julia Sugarbaker. The cast, which included Julia, her pageant queen sister Suzanne, the naive Charlene, and the down-to-earth Mary Jo, had incredible chemistry. The show was a huge hit, because it was funny, but it also wasn't afraid to tackle important topics with style and wit. The magic started to fade around season 5. Behind the scenes, there were reports of serious tension between the actress who played Suzanne, Delta Burke, and the show's creators. The conflict became very public and very messy. Long story short, Delta Burke was let go from the show at the end of the 5th season. Her character was a huge part of the show's comedic energy, and her absence left a massive hole. They tried to replace her, but the new characters never quite clicked in the same way. Soon after, another original cast member also left. The final 2 seasons felt like a different show. The witty spark was gone, and it just wasn't the same powerhouse it used to be. It was a clear case of behind-the-scenes trouble spilling onto the screen and hurting a truly great sitcom. Speaking of a group of fiery women, our next show is an absolute legend, but even legends can stick around a little too long. 4. The Golden Girls.
Yes! We've been robbed!
Oh, boy.
Shh, be quiet. They could still be here. Who?
The Supreme Court. Who?
Thank you for being a friend. The Golden Girls is without a doubt one of the most beloved sitcoms of all time. The show, which started in 1985, was about 4 older single women sharing a house in Miami. You had the sarcastic substitute teacher Dorothy, the naive Minnesota farm girl Rose, the man-loving Southern belle Blanche, and Dorothy's wisecracking Sicilian mother, Sophia. The show was revolutionary for featuring older women as its main characters. It was brilliantly funny, incredibly progressive for its time, and full of heart. For most of its run, it was perfect television. The show ran for 7 seasons, and while it was great for almost its entire run, some fans argue that the final season felt a little weaker than the others. The storyline started to feel a bit repetitive, and it seemed like the show was running out of steam. The real proof that it had gone on too long came right after the show ended. Bea Arthur, the actress who played Dorothy, decided she was done. But the network wanted to keep the money train going. So they created a spin-off called The Golden Palace, where Rose, Blanche, and Sophia buy a hotel. It lasted only 1 season. It was a weak imitation of the original that proved the magic was gone. The spin-off's failure showed that the original series probably should have ended a year earlier, going out on a higher note. Those girls were a family, but what about a show that was literally called a family? 5. Mama's Family.
Let's just move him back the number of spaces that I moved him forward.
She's right. How many spaces did you move it?
Well, how the hell should I know?
Straight from the family sketches on The Carol Burnett Show, Mama's Family premiered in 1983. The show centered on the sharp-tongued, grumpy matriarch Thelma Harper, better known as Mama. She lives with her flighty sister Fran, and her dim-witted son Vinton and his flashy wife Naomi move into her basement. The show was all about the hilarious squabbles and dysfunctional dynamics of this very Southern family. In its first run on a major network, the show had a lot of heart underneath the comedy, featuring talented actors like Carol Burnett and Betty White as guest stars. After 2 seasons, the network canceled it. But here is where the story gets interesting. The show was then revived for syndication, which means it was sold to individual local stations. It came back and ran for 4 more seasons. However, the syndicated version was very different. Most of the original cast was gone, replaced by new neighbors and family members. The humor became much broader, louder, and more cartoonish. The subtle character work was replaced with slapstick and shouting matches. It was still popular, but it felt like a completely different, and many would say cheaper, version of the original. It ran for 130 episodes in total, but those later seasons, with their repetitive plots and over-the-top antics, made it feel like it had long overstayed its welcome. That family had a sharp-tongued mom, but our next show had a sharp-tongued butler. 6. Mr. Belvedere.
Oh, what's on the menu?
Oh, we've got meatloaf and peas, mashed potatoes.
Is this your salute to airline food?
In the mid-'80s, The wise outsider was a popular sitcom trope. Mr. Belvedere was a perfect example. The show was about a proper and highly intelligent English butler, Lynn Belvedere, who takes a job with a typical American family, the Owenses in suburban Pittsburgh. The father was a sports writer, the mother was in law school, and they had 3 kids. The comedy came from the culture clash between the sophisticated Belvedere and the chaotic, messy American family. Mr. Belvedere was always there to offer sage advice and solve the family's problems, and each episode famously ended with him writing in his journal about the day's lessons. The show was a solid family sitcom for its first few seasons. The dynamic was charming and the characters were likable. But like many shows built around kids, it had a problem as the years went on. The kids grew up. The youngest son, Wesley, who was the cute troublemaker, became a teenager, and the premise of him learning lessons from the butler started to wear thin. The show ran for 6 seasons, and by the end, the stories were getting more and more outlandish to keep things interesting. The series finale was particularly strange, with Belvedere getting married and moving to Paris, a sudden end that felt out of sync with the rest of the show. It had simply run out of lessons to teach. A stuffy butler is one thing, but what about an alien from outer space? 7. ALF.
Hey, great! Now we've got a furnished basement. Whoa! I am out of here.
Get ready for an alien life form, better known as ALF. This show was a pop culture phenomenon in the mid-'80s. The story was about a furry, wisecracking alien from the planet Melmac who crash lands his spaceship into the garage of the suburban Tanner family. ALF, whose real name was Gordon Shumway, has to hide from the government while trying to live with the Tanners. Most of the comedy came from ALF's sarcastic comments, his attempts to eat the family cat, Lucky, and the Tanners' constant struggle to keep him a secret. In the beginning, it was fresh and funny. A puppet interacting with a human family was a unique idea, and kids especially loved it. But the show had a very limited premise. How many times can ALF almost get discovered by the nosy neighbors, the Ochmoneks? How many times can he break something expensive or try to cook the cat? After a couple of seasons, the formula became incredibly repetitive. The jokes felt tired, and the stories started to get stale. The show was also apparently very difficult to film because of the technical challenges of working with the puppet. By the 4th season, the ratings were dropping. The writers decided to end the season on a massive cliffhanger. ALF gets captured by the alien task force. The screen reads, "To be continued." But it never was. The show was canceled, leaving fans hanging forever. It was a frustrating end to a show that had already worn out its welcome with the same jokes over and over again. ALF was a weird addition to a family, but our next show added a new kid late in the game to try and save the show. 8. Growing Pains.
No, I was raised Presbyterian. That's a boat race. Well, looking at you makes my heart race.
In the mid-'80s, Growing Pains was the ideal family sitcom. It centered on the Seaver family. The dad, Jason, was a psychiatrist who worked from home. The mom, Maggie, was a reporter. And they had 3 kids, the troublemaking heartthrob Mike, the nerdy brainiac Carol, and the goofy youngest son, Ben. The show was a perfect blend of humor and heart. It dealt with relatable family issues, and the chemistry between the cast was fantastic. It made Kirk Cameron, who played Mike, a huge teen superstar. For its first few seasons, it was a top-rated show. The first sign of trouble was the addition of a new baby, Chrissy, late in the show's run. Adding a new kid is often a sign that writers are running out of ideas. But the biggest shark-jumping moment came in the final season. Mike, who was now older and a teacher, brings home a homeless teenager named Luke, played by a very young Leonardo DiCaprio. While Leo was a great actor, the character felt completely out of place. He was gritty and troubled, and he changed the whole lighthearted dynamic of the family. The show suddenly became about Mike trying to save this kid, and the focus shifted away from the core family that everyone loved. It felt like a desperate attempt to stay relevant, but it only made the show feel tired and disconnected from what made it great in the first place. Adding a new kid is one thing, but what if a family's whole reality was turned upside down by winning the lottery? 9. Roseanne.
This is the winning lottery ticket. I've got it right here. Remember, you told me to watch it on TV.
What are you talking about?
We won the lottery. I can't believe it.
For 8 seasons, Roseanne was hailed as one of the most realistic sitcoms ever made. It showed a working-class American family, the Connors, struggling to pay bills, raise their kids, and find humor in their everyday lives. Roseanne and Dan were not your typical TV parents. They were sarcastic, and they fought, but their love for each other and their family felt real. The show was groundbreaking for its honest portrayal of blue-collar life. It was funny, it was smart, and it was relatable to millions of people. It was a true masterpiece of television. And then came season 9. In the first episode of the final season, the Connor family wins the state lottery. They win $108 million. In an instant, the entire premise of the show was destroyed. The struggling, relatable family was gone, replaced by super rich people living in a mansion and going on fantasy adventures. They met celebrities and lived a life that had nothing to do with the first 8 seasons. Fans hated it. It felt like a complete betrayal of the characters. Then came the series finale, which delivered the ultimate twist. Roseanne reveals the whole lottery win was just a story she made up to cope with the fact that her husband Dan had actually passed away. It was a confusing, depressing, and deeply unsatisfying end to a legendary show. People were so angry that when the show was later rebooted, they pretended that the entire 9th season never even happened. The Connors were a working-class family, but our next family was, well, they were just plain miserable. 10. Married with children.
I am not home.
Then is it okay if I wait?
Let's end with the complete opposite of a wholesome family. Premiering in 1987, Married with Children was the anti-family sitcom. It was rude, it was crude, and it was hilarious. It followed the miserable lives of the Bundy family. Al Bundy was a grumpy shoe salesman who hated his life. His wife, Peg, was lazy and loved to shop. And their kids, Kelly and Bud, were a ditzy popular girl and a nerdy schemer. The show was all about insults, failures, and the misery of suburban life. It was a massive hit for the brand new Fox network because it was so different from anything else on TV. The show was a breath of fresh, if foul-smelling air. But it ran for 11 seasons. That is a very long time to tell jokes about how much a family dislikes each other. After a while, the shock value wore off. The insults started to sound the same. The characters never grew or changed, which was part of the joke, but it also made the show feel stuck in a rut. They added a new kid, 7, in the middle of the run, but he was so unpopular with audiences that he just disappeared from the show without any explanation. By the time the show reached its 11th season, the ratings had dropped, and the network decided to cancel it without even giving it a proper finale. After 11 years, the Bundy family just vanished from the airwaves, a strange and abrupt end for a show that had already pushed its luck for far too long. The Bundys were stuck in their house, but at least they didn't have to work in the same courtroom for 9 years. 11. Night Court.
Come on, Speedy! Move on!
Step into the chaotic, hilarious world of a Manhattan municipal court that only operates at night. That was the setting for Night Court, one of the most popular and durable sitcoms of the 80s. The show centered on a young, prank-loving judge named Harry Stone. He presided over a courtroom full of eccentric characters, the sleazy prosecutor Dan Fielding, the sweet-natured public defender Christine Sullivan, and 2 lovable but dim-witted bailiffs, Nostradamus Bull, Shannon, and Roz Russell. The show's humor came from the absurd cases and the bizarre people who came before the court each night. It was a joke machine, firing off one-liners at a rapid pace. The show ran for an incredible 9 seasons, and that was its biggest problem. The setting, a single courtroom, was very limiting. While the cast was brilliant and had amazing chemistry, there's only so many jokes you can make about weirdos on trial. After about season 6 or 7, the formula became extremely noticeable. Each episode felt the same. A bunch of weird cases would come in, Dan would be greedy, Bull would be clueless, and Harry would make a wise decision in the end. The character development pretty much stopped. They were just playing the same notes over and over again. By the time it reached its final seasons in the early 90s, it felt like a relic from another era. It was a show that was great in shorter bursts, but 9 years in the same courtroom was just too long a sentence. Speaking of a workplace that went on forever, our next show was set in a place where everybody knew your name. Maybe a little too well. 12. Cheers.
As we're dancing, you'll take a chance. You'll give me a little kiss right here.
Carla, I'm not that kind of guy.
Shut up and listen.
Let's head to a place where everybody knows your name. Cheers is often called one of the greatest sitcoms of all time, and for good reason. For 11 seasons, it gave us a hilarious and heartwarming look at the lives of the staff and regulars at a Boston bar. The characters are legendary: the owner and former baseball player Sam Malone, the intellectual waitress Diane Chambers, the hot-tempered Carla, and the barflies Norm and Cliff. The writing was sharp, the jokes were brilliant, and the characters felt like your own friends. The show is often divided into 2 eras, the Diane years and the Rebecca years. The first 5 seasons were defined by the fiery romance between Sam and Diane. When the actress Shelley Long left, many thought the show would end, but it reinvented itself by bringing in a new character, the neurotic Rebecca Howe, played by Kirstie Alley. The show remained popular for another 6 seasons. However, many fans and critics feel that while the Rebecca years were good, they weren't as great as the original. The last couple of seasons in particular felt like they were treading water. The stories became a bit repetitive, and the spark wasn't as bright. While it never had a huge drop in quality like other shows, by season 11 it was clear that it was time to call for last call. Cheers was a classy show, but what about a family show that was built around a classy dad whose kids just grew up? 13. Family Ties.
It is nice to meet you finally. I've heard an awful lot about you.
Hey.
Sha-la-la-la. Family Ties was one of the defining sitcoms of the 1980s. It perfectly captured the cultural shift of the time. The parents, Elise and Stephen Keaton, were former hippies from the 60s. Their oldest son, Alex P. Keaton, was a young, ambitious Republican who idolized President Ronald Reagan. This generational clash was the source of the show's brilliant comedy and its heart. The show was smart, well-written, and it turned Michael J. Fox into a global superstar. With his 2 sisters, Mallory and Jennifer, the Keaton family felt like a real, loving group, even with their political differences. For 5 seasons, the show was on top of the world. But it ran for 7 seasons in total, and those last 2 felt different. The main problem was that the kids grew up. Alex went to college, got a job on Wall Street, and even moved out for a while. The central conflict of him clashing with his parents under the same roof was mostly gone. The other kids were also growing up and getting their own storylines, but none were as strong as the original premise. The show also added a new baby, Andrew, in its later years, which felt like a classic sign of a show running out of gas. By the final season, it seemed like the stories were getting less interesting and the sharp wit had softened. It was still a pleasant show, but the spark that made it a cultural phenomenon had faded. The Keatons were a wholesome family, but our next show was so wholesome it could make your teeth hurt. 14. Full House.
Follow me.
What about me?
You stay right here and watch that hole.
You got it, dude.
Everywhere you look, everywhere you go, there was Full House. This show defined the family-friendly sitcom of the late 80s and early 90s. The story is famous. After his wife passes away, Danny Tanner gets his rock musician brother-in-law, Jesse, and his stand-up comedian best friend, Joey, to move in and help him raise his 3 daughters, DJ, Stephanie, and Michelle. The show was known for its catchphrases like, "How rude," and "You got it, dude," Zrenia, and for its heartwarming Lesson of the Week endings. The early seasons had a genuine charm as these 3 clueless guys tried to figure out how to be parents. But the show ran for 8 long seasons, and as the years went on, it leaned more and more into the sentimentality. The cheese factor went through the roof. Every single episode ended with the characters hugging it out after a heartfelt talk, with swelling violin music in the background. The plots became incredibly predictable and low stakes. A character would tell a small lie or make a simple mistake, and it would be treated like a major crisis that required a group hug to solve. The jokes got repetitive, and the cuteness of Michelle, played by the Olsen twins, started to wear thin. By the end of its run, Full House had become a parody of itself. It was a show that was so sweet it could give you a toothache, and it definitely should have ended a few seasons sooner. Full House was built on cute kids, but what happens when the cute kid is the entire show and he starts growing up? 15. Webster.
For right down the middle. And it's a base at the left field. And it goes way too.
In the 80s, sitcoms starring adorable little kids were huge, and one of the biggest was Webster. The show was about a young African-American boy named Webster Long, whose parents pass away. He is then adopted by his football player godfather, George Papadopoulos, and his wife Catherine, a wealthy white couple. The heart of the show was supposed to be about this new, unconventional family coming together. A lot of the early humor and warmth came from Webster, played by the very small and very cute Emmanuel Lewis, adjusting to his new life and his new parents, learning how to raise a child. For the first few seasons, it worked. The show was sweet and had a lot of feel-good moments. But the entire appeal of the show was based on Webster being a tiny, cute kid. As the years went on, the actor Emmanuel Lewis started to grow up, as kids do. The problem was, his character Webster was supposed to be aging much slower. It started to become a little strange. He was a teenager in real life, but still playing a much younger kid who was getting into childlike situations. The "aw, how cute" factor was gone, and what was left was a show that had lost its main hook. It ran for 6 seasons, and by the end, the premise just didn't make sense anymore. It felt like everyone was just pretending he was still a little kid, and it was a lesson that a show built entirely around one gimmick can't last forever. Webster was adopted by a kind family, but our next family's mom had to leave, and they tried to replace her. 16. Gimme a Break.
Everybody needs somebody.
She don't need you.
Gimme a Break starred the incredible singer and actress Nell Carter. She played Nell Harper, a housekeeper for a family, the Kaniskis. The family was led by the widowed police chief, and he had 3 daughters. The show's comedy and heart came from Nell acting as a surrogate mother to the 3 girls, giving them advice and helping them navigate their teenage years. Nell's sassy, no-nonsense attitude, combined with her powerful singing voice, made the show a unique and enjoyable watch for its first few seasons. It was a reliable family sitcom with a lot of charm. The show started to fall apart as the girls grew up and the original actors began to leave. The oldest daughter left for college. Then, the father of the family passed away. The show tried to keep going, adding a young foster son to the family to give Nell someone to take care of. But the biggest and most disastrous change came in the final season. The show moved the remaining characters from their home in California all the way to New York City. The premise was that Nell was trying to make it in the big city. The show was completely rebooted. It had a new theme song, a new setting, and a mostly new cast. It had nothing to do with the show fans had watched for 5 years. This desperate attempt to save the series failed completely, and it was canceled. That show lost its mother figure, but our next show lost its main star and tried to keep going. 17th. Head of the class.
Room 19.
19, thanks.
Oh, Mr. Moore. Look, I better warn you about your first period class.
Warn me? I've taught in the toughest high schools in New York City.
Head of the Class had a great concept. It was set in a New York City high school and focused on the IHP, the Individualized Honors Program. This was a class full of super genius teenagers. They were brilliant, but also socially awkward. Their world is turned upside down when they get a new history teacher, a laid-back, unconventional guy named Charlie Moore, played by the great Howard Hessman. Mr. Moore teaches them that there's more to life than grades. The show was basically the sitcom version of the movie Dead Poets Society. It was charming and funny, with a great cast of young actors. The show was a solid hit for 4 seasons. The relationship between Mr. Moore and his students was the absolute heart and soul of the series. Then, at the beginning of season 5, Howard Hessman left the show. He reportedly felt the show wasn't breaking new ground anymore. This was a catastrophic blow. The producers decided to keep the show going and hired a new teacher, Billy McGregor, a wacky Scottish comedian. The problem was, Billy was a completely different character. The entire tone of the show shifted. It lost its heart and became much broader and sillier. The students he was supposed to be teaching were now almost all gone and replaced by new ones. It felt like a pale imitation of its former self and was canceled after that one season without its star. Replacing a teacher is tough, but what about 2 buddies whose whole gimmick vanished when they got married? 18. Perfect Strangers.
Larry Appleton?
Larry Appleton, that's me.
Don't be ridiculous. If you were watching TV in the late 80s, you definitely remember Balky Bartokomous. Perfect Strangers was a classic buddy comedy. It followed Larry Appleton, a high-strung, aspiring photographer whose life is turned upside down when his long-lost cousin, Balky, shows up at his door. Balky is a naive and cheerful shepherd from a fictional Mediterranean island called Mypos. He knows almost nothing about America, and his hilarious misunderstandings of language and customs drove the show's comedy. The chemistry between the 2 leads was perfect, and Balky's Dance of Joy became an iconic TV moment. For about 6 seasons, the show was a delightful and silly ride. The odd couple dynamic of Larry and Balky living together and getting into trouble was fantastic. But then, the show made the classic mistake of letting its characters grow up too much. Larry and Balky both met girlfriends, and eventually, they both got married. In the later seasons, they all moved into a big house together to raise their families. The original premise of 2 very different single guys trying to make it in the city was totally gone. It became a standard domestic sitcom. The jokes weren't as sharp, and the fish-out-of-water comedy that made Balky so lovable was gone. The show ran for 8 seasons, but the magic had clearly left the building long before the finale.